This is going to be called Low-Hanging Fruit, or it's going to be titled something more like A Prelude to a Live Stream. Let's get to this.
The other day,
I got recommended this video. It was okay. Originally, I kept it as a saved video just in case I wanted to do something with it, but I wasn't sure. And then I re-listened to the video right now. I'm going through a bit of transition phase myself, so I think this is going to be interesting. All right, let's check it out. By the way, you might see this change colors. Right now we're going with a light. Later on, hoping to hit a dark. This depends on how long this video is.
I posted a video on the Church Fathers, and I had a lot of interesting conversations with Catholics in the comment section. And I thought, I have questions about Catholicism. Did you know that there is so many different writers and works in Catholicism that Protestants just have no access to?
So I'm going to disagree with him right away. Protestants definitely have access to all of these works. For me, as a Catholic, I didn't really start reading them until Amazon became a thing. Until then, it was whatever was available at either your Catholic bookstore, at your religious store, meaning like a Protestant store, or what was available at the local bookstore. If it wasn't in any of those, you just couldn't get them unless you were at a college. So while it is true that for years of Western history, it has not been available to the majority, and then before that, it may be only available to theologians and academics, or those who specialized in rare texts. Since the advent of online resources and online shopping, these resources are available to everyone. I get obscure books from Catholicism, Lutheranism, Buddhism, you name it. So it is out there. eBay, Amazon, and there's like Books A Million. I mean, you can figure it out. All right, let's continue.
So I came up with 8 questions that I have for Catholics that I truly am interested in hearing y'all's answers. Do practicing Catholics see the issues with the Vatican and its authoritarian nature? Or you see it but you think it's okay? How do you justify it? I don't see where in any time in the 1st, 2nd century, or anywhere in the Gospels, or when the apostolic teachers were preaching, I can't understand how it went from that to now we are in charge. Every other church looks to us. And you're talking about Rome. In my interpretation of Revelation, Rome is the bad guy.
Okay, so he's starting to go off into a different question, even though he says it's one question. Let's answer the first part about the authoritarian nature of the Vatican. It's really simple. The early church had a bishop system. Those bishops would eventually become the patriarchate. The patriarchate would eventually be survived by the Bishop of Rome. Later on, the patriarchate would be revived multiple times, most recently after the decline of Sovietism. So when Russia changed into a Christian nation, the areas that were being repressed were able to come alive again in Christianity, and in this case, Orthodox Christianity. That expression of faith was once one faith with the Catholic Church, and they themselves are Catholic, but they are not Roman. That Roman aspect doesn't have to do with the Roman Empire or even the city of Rome, because technically the Pope has left the Vatican specifically for Avignon, France. No, it has to do with the Latin Mass, which is a Roman Mass, meaning it was spoken in Latin. Now, with the growth of the church, that's no longer the case. You now speak in the common tongue, but at one time, the Vulgate, the vulgar language, was Latin. That was the common tongue. And before that, it would have been the Septuagint with the Greek language, because that was the common tongue. Okay, but how did the apostles become bishops? That's a more interesting question. So in the Bible, there are distinctions between, depending on your translation and depending on the language that you're reading it in, between bishops, deacons, and what Catholics would call priest. You might call them a preacher or a pastor or a shepherd. But these distinctions are there because the original apostles, the original 12, would lay on hands and have someone fill their seat when one was martyred or when simply one died. I'm not sure I've heard of a retirement for these original Christians, but that tradition would develop into what we would understand, meaning Catholics would understand, as a hierarchy. That hierarchy in the original church, when Chalcedon, Antioch, Jerusalem, later Constantinople, Rome, and Alexandria were the heads or the center points of Christian power. These archbishops would become popes. The word pope just means father, papa. So these archbishops would get together and make the rules. And Peter, the seat of Peter, that is seen as the first among equals. Now, there's a whole other history that I've done in other videos that you're welcome to watch. And there's really good history on this if you want to understand it from ancient faith ministries and also patristic films. These are Orthodox. They're not Catholic, at least not Latin Catholic, but they will give you a good history of how that development happened. And you can see when that divide happens between the two lungs of the church, when that division happens in the Great Schism, you can understand that history better. Obviously, you don't know that history yet, and it would be too long to get into right now.
I don't know how Rome went from being the bad guy to all of a sudden now it's in charge and everybody else looks to it for understanding on Christianity, on the teachings of Jesus. So I would really like to know what justifies Rome as the headquarters, as the number one guy. I'm talking about what makes the Church of Rome that important.
So Peter and Paul are both martyred in Rome, which makes them the founder of that church. Before them, there was either a communal or a house church that was Christian. Afterwards, they would be seen as a place of honor because both Paul and Peter were martyred. But that development of importance happens very quickly. Now, when you hear about Revelation and you hear about Babylon and you immediately understand that when they say Babylon, they're talking about Rome, you think Rome is the bad guy. But that's the Roman Empire. That's not the church in Rome. And Jesus conquers through his soldiers, meaning his witnesses, his martyrs, Rome. Not through war, but through love, sacrifice, and mercy. The Christians were known, and these Christians would be Catholic, were known for helping the people who were persecuting them when they were starving or when they would have invasion. So the same people who would persecute the Christians would then see these Christians turn and love them, and that would start the conversion. The church in Rome grew until finally it had acceptance. Now, whether you want to say that acceptance comes from Constantine or one other emperor, it doesn't matter. The point is that the church was persecuted and, in following the teachings of Jesus, conquered the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire fell, the Rome that was being talked about, just like the Babylon that is being spoken of, no longer exists. That Roman Empire no longer exists. The city is still called Rome. And the language, the Latin language, is still a Romance language, as is Spanish, as is French. The point is that the Rome as exists today, whether it's the Catholic Church, which is the universal church, which is throughout the world, not just in Rome, or Italy and Vatican City, which contain Rome, it's like a false friend thing with the wordplay. You're misunderstanding the word Rome with what's meant by Rome in the Bible or what's meant by Babylon in the Bible. It's talking about a specific time and a specific period in Roman history, or world history even, just like the Seleucid Empire or any of the empires that were persecuting the Jewish people. Yes, they call them Hellenistic, they call them Greek, but they weren't actually Greek. They were a different empire, but it was a catch-all, so that way they could express themselves more openly in the writing. All right, that's good there. Let's keep going.
This question is kind of for fun. It pertains to that first question, and it's not as serious as any of the other questions on this list. And that is, what do practicing Catholics think about the Vatican Archives? Do you guys believe they even exist? So, do you think that the Vatican Archives exist and that they're holding hidden information that the Catholic Church doesn't want the world to know?
Okay, so last time, or the first time I tried to watch this guy's video, this is where I jumped off. But I'm going to take it more seriously because now I've watched the whole video and I've seen that he's being, if not serious, he's being honest, while playful. So, does the Vatican have an archive? Yes. Is there anything interesting in the archive to the rest of humanity? Probably not. Unless you're a scholar or a historian or a textual critic, the church isn't hiding information in there. In fact, a lot of the discoveries were actually stored and released by Muslim scholars. There was a great Muslim or Islamic period of scientific endeavor that would lead into, when these discoveries would become known, into the Enlightenment. Without the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, we wouldn't be where we are today. And that comes from both the documents that are preserved in the Vatican Archives and the documents that are released by these Muslim scholars. So, did the church ever hold back knowledge from lay individuals and non-Catholic individuals? Yes. Is that going on now? Not so much. Secular scholars have gone into the Vatican Archives. There's a lot of stuff in there, and some of this stuff needs to be rediscovered, but it's not being actively hidden. Was there a point in medieval history where that happened? Yeah. Was there a point before that where that was happening? Not really. But the Vatican Archives, as they exist in conspiracy stories and in fiction, are not a thing. The actual archives are just old documents, usually transcriptions, scribal writings of ancient documents. Most of the science that's in there is not correct, and a lot of it just documents the evolution of study, whether it's philosophy, theology, science, cosmology, astronomy. That's what's in there. So it's not the most interesting stuff, and a lot of it's very dry, but you can get access to it. I think there's a digital or virtual version that you can actually look at. But yeah, there you go. So not that big of a conspiracy. Does it exist? Yes. Does it hold the secrets to the universe? No, unless you consider the Bible the secret of the universe. And in that case, well, just read the Bible. The translations are out there. And the Catholic Church is going to have, I think, a good copy of the Septuagint and a good copy of the Vulgate. And that's kind of it. And then they try to preserve them.
Next question's very complicated because I really have no idea where you guys stand. I've never been a Catholic. Where do Catholics go for their information if they have a question?
No, he's going to actually develop this question, but I want to answer that initial part. Most Catholics who have the internet, that is, and are Western, I guess American, go to Catholic Answers, which is a apostolate. It's not part of the church. The other place they would probably go is EWTN, which is a Catholic network. It used to be a TV station. Now I don't know what they call themselves, as traditional television is dying out. Probably a lot of YouTube. Before the internet, you would have to go to the catechism, and if the church that you went to had a bookstore with a collection of church father writings, that's where you would go. Most would carry St. Augustine. Some bookstores would carry Thomas Aquinas, and that's pretty much it. So if you're in neither of those, you go to your parents. If your parents have been properly catechized and you've been catechized, meaning that a bishop, a priest, or a lay officiate has properly taught you in CCD or RCIA or some other program for learning the faith, that would be your education on the faith. but it's really about what's passed down from your parents to you, and then whatever you pick up in Mass at church. So if you're reading the Bible like you're supposed to as a Catholic, and you're going to church every Sunday or even every day, you will get a lot of Christian teaching and Christian tradition. If you're only going on holidays and your family's fairly secular, then you're not going to get very much. Now, in today's world, where we have access to digital archives, pretty much everybody can read the Church Fathers, and that's where most Catholics are going nowadays, even a lot of Protestants, and that's leading a lot of them to traditionalism and even radical traditionalism, which is a bastardization of Catholicism, unfortunately. But there was the opposite problem before, which is you had liberation theology in the Catholic Church, where there was so little and so poor catechesis. That means learning and teaching of the faith, that people kind of went wackadoodle with what the church was teaching, and they took it into kind of a revolutionistic, socialistic way. Anyway, let's keep going.
So, do you guys study the Church Fathers? And if you do, is that where you go? Or do you go directly to the Bible? And if you can't figure that out, then you study the Church Fathers.
So Catholics actually have 3 sources outside of a priest, or their parents or grandparents. And that would be the Bible. And it would have to be a Catholic approved Bible. That's not that they took something out, is that they're keeping books in. For Orthodox, it's a little bit more complicated because they have to find the other books. So it's harder for them to find a translation. Recently, that's gotten easier for them, but they also have more books than Protestants, and they even have more books than Latin Rite Catholics. So an Eastern Rite Catholic or an Orthodox Catholic is going to have another Maccabees and I believe another Esdras. For Catholics, we're going to have Maccabees, a little bit longer of Esther from you all. And I think we expand wisdom. Anyway, everybody has the exact same New Testament. There's nobody who's a practicing Catholic or Orthodox in a traditional sense that has a different canon for the New Testament. It's just what Protestants call the Apocrypha that's different. We call it the Deuteral canon or second canon. We don't hold it up to the same authority as the first canon, which would be the canon that you all use. Now, let's take that one step further. Catholics would use the Bible. They would use the Liturgy of the Hours, which not all Catholics know about. And they would also use the Catechism. Those 3 sources right there is going to give you a really good foundation. But you have to be literate, and you have to have an understanding of Catholic tradition. How Catholics got a breviary, which is where the liturgy hours are contained in a more condensed version, before the advent of the internet, of digital cells, of online stores. I don't know how a regular layperson would get a breviary before the printing press. No clue. Someone would have to handwrite everything out that's in there, and they would hand it on. And then there's another book that Catholics use called the Missal. The Missal is the Bible, but it's broken up into daily readings, and it's 3 readings. If you get an old Missal, it would be 2 readings. An Old Testament reading and a New Testament reading. Now it's going to be Old Testament epistles and New Testament for Sundays, and then a Old Testament and New Testament reading for weekdays. And you get through pretty much the whole Bible. There's some parts that are missing, but that's the secular nature of the church. So they have 3 reading cycles, A, B, and C. That's how Catholics would get their knowledge of the Bible. Reading the Bible itself, reading the Missal, practicing the breviary or the Liturgy of the Hours, and the Catechism. Those are your sources of knowledge. If you're not literate, or you don't want to take the time or have the money for that, you would just talk to your priest, talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, and just follow whatever they tell you.
Or do you go to your leaders of the church at the time and they go study the Bible and the Church Fathers? Do you see why I don't exactly know y'all's process when it comes to trying to figure out a question? And since y'all don't use the Bible as your sole authority.
So sola scriptura gets a bad rap. That doesn't mean that Catholics don't look at the Bible as an authority. He's going to go there. I'm going to skip over that because this video is getting kind of long. But Catholics do view the Bible as an authority. So it would be the Bible, the Magisterium, sacred tradition. Those are our 3 major pillars. So sacred tradition would be taught to you from your parents, but sacred tradition is not minor T tradition or custom. So you have local customs that can or cannot be part of tradition, lowercase t, and tradition can or cannot be part of uppercase T tradition. So uppercase T tradition is what all the church is supposed to be doing. That's why we have a liturgy, which is contained in the missal and the lectionary. And that's how we keep all Catholics on the same page. But that's controlled by the Conference of Cardinals, which are just bishops with funnier hats or bigger hats. And the cardinals are usually who you're going to choose from to someone to be the Pope. So the Pope is just a bishop. That might sound heretical, but it's not. The Pope is just a bishop. He's the Bishop of Rome. He's also the bishop of the entire Catholic Church. Okay. And other bishops that are not Catholic but are still part of the one true church are going to be in Orthodoxy. And I'm not sure if Chalcedon's been brought back into the fold. Who knows?
And with that, I will let you guys explain to me, and it might be that every individual approaches the subject different. Let me know in the comments. I'm ready to hear what the process is like.
You know, he asked that question. Let me answer that. The process. So I'm going to go 4 different periods in my life, using kind of real examples and kind of using my friends' experiences as they have told it to me as well to kind of make a fuller picture, add some color. So let's say you're a kid and you have a question about God or the Bible or the authority of the church for some reason. I don't know why a kid would even ask that. But let's say you have a moral conundrum. You'd go to your parents would give you an answer. If the parents can't answer it and they want to go to a priest, they take you to the church. You could go to confession. If you're not old enough for confession, the parents might have you talk to the priest. They'll ask the priest, of course, first. If that doesn't help, if you happen to know a monk or a nun, you might go to them. If you have a spiritual advisor, which is very rare nowadays, but if you have one, you'd go to them and they would give you guidance. Usually it's just the priest in confession who does this and your parents at home. Now, you're a teenager. You're going to go to the Bible. You can read. You're literate. You went to school. And then you're going to argue with your parents about it, and then you're going to do whatever you want to do anyway. Then you get to, let's say, college, early career. That's where it's going to be your other sources. Maybe you might still go to your parents. Maybe you're still going to go to your priest. But you're going to be relying a little bit more on your intellect and your reason and sources. Get a little bit older in life, and now you're going to be going to the priest directly. Maybe you'll still confer with your parents, but it's now after the age of 15, after you've been confirmed in your faith, after you've gone through your development, after you become a mature Christian, you're going to be asking the priest for advice. And you're going to be looking at the Bible, what the Bible says. And then you're going to confer with your parents if you think that's necessary. There you go.
This next question, you could probably start at a different point, but I chose to start here because I want to know how important is it that your beliefs in the veneration of the saints and your beliefs in like the Marian dogmas, these more complicated and controversial beliefs, I know you guys hold them to be true. I'm saying, how important are they to you?
So he's going to get into more technical bits of this question, but I'm just going to answer kind of in general. To be a Catholic, you have to accept the Marian dogmas. It's just that simple. There's only 4. 2 of them every Christian is going to believe or agree with if they're a Christian. Mary was a virgin. Mary's the mother of Jesus. That's it. Those are the 2 that everyone agrees with. The one that everyone gets upset about is co-redeemer, mediatrix. Those aren't actual Marian dogmas. The point is that the Marian dogmas is only 4. 2 of them everyone agrees with. 2 of them are controversial. The big controversy is that she always stayed a virgin. The 4th controversy is that she got assumed into heaven. The Dormition or the Assumption, depending on whether you're Catholic or Orthodox, is ancient Christian. It's not modern Christian. Now, there's some Protestant pastors who will argue how ancient, and they'll say, well, it's in 38 or 48. Then they'll say it's 300. And then they'll say it's 480. And they'll give different dates like that. That's still ancient. That's still early church period. So I don't see what they're arguing about. But Catholics are not supposed to worship Mary, and they're definitely not supposed to worship the saints. Mary is a saint. I don't know anyone who would argue against that. Mary's a saint. Depending on your practice and your custom, meaning your local custom, the patron saint could be very important to your practice. My patron saint is St. Thomas More. I'm named after a saint, St. Ramon, who's the patron saint of childbirth, or difficult childbirths, I forget. And then I have a personal saint that I look to. I look at St. Joan of Arc. These are the saints that I've always looked to. And there are other saints here and there that I've looked to as examples throughout my life. But veneration is in worship, and you're supposed to be asking God for guidance through these saints. So, like, you want to use the saint as an example of how to live your life and be a good Catholic. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be asking them to find your keys. I understand that there's Catholics that do that. I was a Catholic that did that when I was younger, even when I wasn't actively part of the church and I was a lapsed Catholic. But you're not supposed to be asking for parking spots or for finding your keys. They're supposed to be an example of how to live a good Christian life and a good Catholic life. That's what they're there for. And they're there to show you how to get over the hurdles of temptation they taught by their life, by the life that they lived, and by the temptations they overcame, and by the forgiveness they sought after they failed. Those kind of things, the sacrifices they did. You're supposed to look at those as examples of being a good Christian, being a good Catholic. You're not supposed to be worshiping them. As for Mary, yeah, we view her as a typology for the church. So it does get pretty deep, but we're not worshiping the church and we're not worshiping Mary. We're also not worshiping the Bible. There's more there, but I think that's good.
Can you explain to me why I should believe that the Pope is infallible? Why should I believe that just because he is, I was going to say descended from Peter, but he's not, he's appointed in a line from Peter. So they're not blood, it's a appointed line, which to me matters, but that's not really the subject I'm trying to talk about. I'm saying, even if I give you that he's appointed down the line from Peter, what makes him infallible?
Obviously, he was trying to stay away or steer clear of apostolic succession. But let's look at this a different way. So Christ promised that the gates of hell would not prevail over the church. Arianism almost completely conquered the church. The famous quote is, "One day the church woke up to find herself Arian." And yet that heresy eventually dissipated. There have been bad popes, like the Borgias. There have been scandals in the church. And not just in the Catholic sense. Whether it's Protestant pastors, mega churches, you can find bad Christians everywhere, whether it's in the Crusades, or whether it's during a hurricane in Houston. There's bad Christians, there's bad preachers, there's bad teachers, and there's bad popes. So what is infallibility? Obviously, the Pope can guess the wrong team to win a soccer game. They can pick the wrong team. They can be wrong about the weather. So what does infallibility mean? It means that when they make rulings that dictate how the church expresses its faith, they will not be wrong. The Holy Spirit is guiding them away from error in that one respect. To put it a different way, it prevents them from binding the church to error. That doesn't mean that the Pope themselves can't be wrong. It means that the church itself will not accept an incorrect teaching from the Pope. There's no Catholic that would word it that way outside of myself. The way we would say it is that it'll prevent him from binding the church to error. But what it's saying is that the church will not accept an erroneous teaching from the Pope. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, there was a Pope who went to Avignon, France. A nun who was censored by him eventually got to speak to him face to face and told him to go back, that he was wrong. One of the popes who was a saint, Saint Pope Paul II, he famously made some unforced errors when it comes to Catholic teaching on Islam and on sexuality that some people didn't like. And he then corrected his statements. So this is not saying that the Pope's opinion, personal opinion, theological opinion, can't be wrong. It's saying that his teaching, if it is wrong, will not be bound to the church. That's what infallibility means. To put it another way, if you have the Bible and you have the Catechism and you have sacred tradition and you have the magisterium, and the Pope says something that counters all of them will then tell him he's wrong and he'll apologize and correct himself. That willingness to admit his error is infallibility. Because by admitting his error, he's not binding the church to his erroneous opinion. Okay, that's pretty much understandable. There we go.
For example, he's like the only person in the world that I know of that literally lives in a castle.
Except for the English monarchy.
He lives in a...
Also the Spanish monarchy. Is there Moroccan monarchy? I think there is. So yeah, there are other people that live in castles.
He comes out dressed in these gold robes with this gold staff. Whenever he walks out, people bow their... This is the most respected man on the planet, and I just cannot understand why.
The Pope is respected because of his position and because of the power the church has held. But it's also respected by the majority of the world because the majority of the world is Catholic. It's the largest religion in the world. After that, Islam, a certain branch of Islam. After that, Protestantism. And Protestantism, there's a denomination that's huge. I don't remember which one it is. The point is that he's treated with respect, sometimes duly, sometimes unduly, because of the reverence people hold for the church, because of the reverence that people hold for God. And a lot of people view the Pope as representing God on earth. Whether or not that's a correct or incorrect belief is not the point here. That's why people are acting that way. He is the leader of their faith. And what he says, if he says something binding, is binding. To be fair, church popes say very few binding things. I think there's 7, maybe 8. Now, there's people like Michael Lofton from Reason and Theology who argue the popes say tons of binding things. They don't. I get it. For the traditionalist out there and for the Easternist out there, yeah, anything the Pope says is binding on the lay Catholic to the extent that it doesn't contradict the faith. And any teaching is the official teaching of that time in the spirit of that Pope, in the spirit of that pontificate, in the spirit of whatever council we're under, whether it's the Vatican II, Vatican I, whatever council we're under. Get all that? That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking to this gentleman here. Speaking of which, I don't know the name of your channel, but if you want to come talk to me one-on-one, you're welcome to come on this channel.
And my next 2 questions, they could be one question, but I tried to separate them and make them 2, and I would like you to try to address them as 2 separate questions, if you could. If sola scriptura is false, as you guys claim it is, why does the church, throughout all the ecumenical councils, throughout the history of the church, constantly address the canon of the Bible? Why are they so worried about the canon if the canon is not authoritative? Now, I understand it's a little bit more complicated than that because the canon isn't y'all's sole authority. The canon is like an authority.
So he almost said it correct. The biblical corpus, to quote someone, is an authority. It's not the sole authority. Like I said before, we have holy tradition, or sacred tradition, and we have liturgy. There we go. Okay, so we have the Bible, or scripture. We have scripture as an authority. We have the magisterium, which includes the Pope, as an authority, basically all the bishops put together. Then we have sacred tradition, which is going to be handed down mostly by your parents. And then you have liturgy, and liturgy is the Mass. So liturgy is super important. St. John Chrysostom probably wrote the most famous liturgy, but every time that the liturgy changes, people get into a big hissy. The point is that these are the guiding columns that guide Catholics. The Mass itself, the service itself, the bowing, the taking of the Eucharist, confession, the hymns, the psalms, the readings, these are our guides. So the Bible is an authority, but it's also surrounds and enriches the other authorities of the church. But the church's authority submits to the authority of God. You might say, how does that work? How do you know when God is talking? Well, the word of God is Jesus. And the record of the word is the Bible. And the reason why the debate on what is canon is so important is because of the Gnostic texts and other gospels that came later. These are not texts that, unlike some mythicists, think that all the gospels were written about the same time. No, the earliest writings are the epistles, and those are written just after Jesus died. They're written during the life of Paul. After the epistles is going to come the gospels, and depending on whether you date them pre-temple collapse or post-temple collapse, they're either prophetic or they're reporting history that just happened. And these are called lives, or what we would call biographies. Then you have Revelation, which almost everyone agrees is dated a little bit after. And that's going to be talking about the persecutions under Domitian and under Nero. That's the New Testament. But it changes the interpretation, or completes the interpretation, depending on your point of view, of the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, if you're just using the canon that's accepted by certain Jewish groups and by most Protestants, it makes it very complicated and very hard to explain the development into Christianity. While if you're a Catholic or an Orthodox or a Chalcedonian or an Ethiopian, and you have this expanded corpus that includes what's called deuterocanonical, not apocryphal, deuterocanonical books, you then get the history that happens after Jewish independence. And you have the Hellenistic, basically after Alexander the Great conquers Phoenicia and conquers Tyre and conquers Egypt. You have that history, and you have the war, the Maccabean War. And Julius Maccabeus is super important to Jewish history, and you can't understand things like the Jewish conflict with Rome if you don't understand the conflict between the Maccabees and, I believe it's the Seleucid Empire. If you don't understand that conflict, if you don't understand the pending conflict between Rome and Parthia, you're missing out on what's happening with the temple. And the temple is the metaphor that Jesus is using for his death and resurrection. The death and resurrection of the Jewish people, from the sons to the adopted sons to the Gentiles. That huge metaphor you lose out if you don't have a proper canon. The problem is that with Gnostic texts and other texts that come anywhere from 100 to I think up to 1,000 years later, but anything written after Revelation gets really complicated, because those texts, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Adam, change the meaning of the Bible and change the meaning of the Old Testament into a way that goes against the interpretation that's presented in the New Testament. So another testament of Christ is not available to traditional and Orthodox Catholics and traditional Orthodox Christians. That's why that debate is so important. But the ecumenical councils are not defining canon. They're defining what's not canon. It's a very different thing. Everybody kind of agrees on the canon for a pretty long period. The church fathers are writing not only to say what they themselves understand of the Bible, but they're writing also to say what isn't canon. They're writing against heresies. That's why one of the most famous works is Against Heresies. All right.
So, because you guys have made such a good argument that sola scriptura is not right, when you guys are presented with a textual criticism or a contradiction in the Bible, why do I see you guys acting like the Protestants?
What you're talking about is traditional Catholics are radical traditionalists. The radical traditional Catholics do not represent the majority of Catholics. Now, most Catholics are poorly catechized. So the other thing that you're seeing is Catholics copying or mimicking Protestant defenses. That happens a lot, and it's something that I've spoken out against. It's something that Trent Horn and other famous Catholic apologists have spoken out against. Catholics should not be arguing like Protestants, But a lot of times that's what ends up happening, because that's the extent of their knowledge of apologetics. But apologetics is not theology, and apologetics is not the Catholic religion. You should not confuse apologetics with the faith. They're two different things.
The best answer is, well, we're not qualified to interpret this. That's kind of the Catholic answer I've heard, is there's people higher than us that God has appointed to interpret more complex things. Now, I don't buy that, but I'm saying you're already arguing that sola scriptura, the Bible being the sole authority, is wrong. Isn't it okay for there to be some contradictions now? Like, why does it have to be a perfect book, yet not fully authoritative? I know it's very complex, but like, why do y'all have to justify everything when you can just say the church leaders know better than the Bible?
So no Catholic, at least no Catholic in good standing, believes that a church leader, here a church leader could mean anything by the way that he worded that. It could mean the Pope, it could mean the magisterium, it could mean the cardinals, it could mean bishops, it could mean priests, it could mean deacons. I doubt he means monks and nuns, but who knows? So the church has a hierarchy, and in the official hierarchy, the church teaches that the slave must submit to their master. That's from the Bible. What that means is that a monk will, or a sister, a nun, will submit to their superior, and their superior will submit to their sponsor, whether that sponsor is a spiritual leader or if that's their bishop. And then whatever the bishop says, they'll do, even if they think it's a bad idea. Even if they're going to fight with the bishop over it, they still submit. And then the bishop has to submit to the Pope. But it gets more complicated because you have a deacon in the church. The deacon submits to the priest submits to the bishop. So everyone's submitting to the bishop. And then the bishops have an order, a brotherhood. So a bishop would submit to an archbishop, and the archbishop would submit to a cardinal. But the cardinals had to submit to the Pope. The Orthodox faith has this exact same structure, and it's the same submission. But you don't see it as strictly enforced. And then when it is enforced, it's a huge deal. But for Catholics, that military hierarchy, that royal hierarchy is respected because the bishops are the princes of the church. So yeah, that's how that works. So no one thinks that even the Pope is above the Bible. The Pope has to submit to the Bible. Now, where you might be getting a bit confused, that you go, well, don't you guys say that you guys created the Canon or that you guys created the Bible? Yes, because all the Christians were Catholic at one point. And the Catholics are the ones who wrote the Bible, meaning Christians wrote the Bible. So when Catholics say Catholics wrote the Bible, what we're saying is Christians wrote the Bible. And I don't know any Christian who would argue with the claim that it was Christians who wrote the Bible. So the Old Testament's written by Jewish people, the New Testament's written by Christians. And the Christians at that time would have been Catholic. Christians get the name Christian in the Old Testament. Christians get the name Catholic from Saint Ignatius of Antioch when they're arguing against some pagans, and they start getting called Catholic, and they just take the term. So Catholics are Christians, Christians are Catholics, and that's the case for the first 1,552 years. So if someone wrote the Bible and they were Christian, they were therefore Catholic, because that's before the Catholic Protestant split. And it's definitely even before the Great Schism. So you could even say that they're Orthodox. You can say they're Orthodox Catholic. And they're in Jerusalem, so you could say they're Orthodox Eastern Catholics, or Orthodox Jerusalem Catholics, or Hebrew Catholics, or Greek Catholics, or, anywhere they were writing Greek, because it was Koine Greek that the New Testament was written in. So that Koine Greek, whether it was in Greece, whether it was in Macedon, whether it was in Athens, whether it was in Antioch, whether it was in Jerusalem, whether it was in Alexandria, people spoke Greek. So the Bible was written in Greek, because that's what people spoke and wrote. Later, it would be rewritten in Latin, because that was what the majority of the people spoke. And now that we live in countries where the majority language is English or Japanese or Chinese or Russian, That's the language the Bible's presented in. It's not a mystery.
And number 8's not really a super in-depth hard one, but I thought this was the most important one to address, so this is the last one. And if Catholicism is true, and we should all be Catholics, but we're obviously not being Catholics, what do Catholics think about the Protestants and about the Eastern Orthodox Church? And there's other ones, but like those are examples. What do you guys think about them as far as being saved and having salvation and going to heaven, right? These are all important topics to believers.
So let me break it down real simple. Orthodox and Catholics are part of the one true church. All their sacraments are correct. The only thing they deny is the Pope. Depending on which Catholic theologian you're speaking to, and depending on which time period, an Orthodox in good standing who follows Christ is getting to heaven. So that's where that stands. Protestantism is a little more complicated depending on which Protestant faith you are, depending on where you are in the chronology, in the history of Protestantism. If you're not part of the anathema, meaning you were born into Protestantism, basically through no fault of your own, which sounds very patronizing, you're a brother in Christ, unless you know better. We call it irresistible ignorance. So if you're a victim of irresistible ignorance, there's a chance you get into heaven. Now, separate brothers of Christ, excommunicated, who knows? I know you don't want to hear that answer, but it really is. Only God can judge. But when it comes to just in general, the general rule is if you're a part of the wars against the Catholic Church and you were killing Catholics, then it's very unlikely that you're getting into heaven. It's not impossible, very unlikely. So you have an anathema against you. If, on the other hand, you're a modern Lutheran or a modern Baptist, but you still follow the sacraments to the best of your understanding and you follow God to the best of your understanding, then there's a very strong chance you're getting into heaven. Again, only God can judge. Catholics don't even think fellow Catholics are definitely getting into heaven. So that's one of the problems that you're going to have with this conversation. Catholic priests don't even know if they themselves are saved. So in Catholicism, we don't even judge ourselves. We don't judge others. We don't judge ourselves. We don't know if we're saved. We don't know if we're getting into heaven. We hope. We have the hope of salvation. We have that hope through Christ because it's a grace. It's a gift. But we still don't know if we're going to get in because we have to follow God's rules. Some Protestants will call that work in faith. And when I was a very young YouTuber, I would have used that same terminology. But basically, it's conforming to God's will versus not conforming to God's will. And if you don't conform to God's will, then you live in a dead faith. So you're just saying all the right words, but you're not actually living your faith. We're all sinners, but we believe in forgiveness and there's a whole penitential system. The simplest way to explain it is that Catholics believe in God and believe in Christ and believe in the Holy Spirit. They believe it's a Trinity and they submit to God's authority. And we believe that God has one true universal and one baptism, that the Trinity, He, three in one, that the Trinity gave to us as a means to salvation. So that's kind of the gist of it. I think those are all the answers I'm going to give today. You're welcome to come onto my channel. I'd love to have a conversation with you and do it live because I don't have to be streaming nowadays. Have a good one. Peace.